Okay, this is the main points of it. It addresses your staffing plans, how logos and names are displayed. That actually does matter. I can't just throw up Tyler's EMS service on ambulance today and call that good and think that they're going to just roll with that. I can't create a logo and have it non-approved and slap it on the side of a truck. It also covers heating and cooling requirements, which, believe it or not, is actually an issue at some points in time. You do have to have a heated and cooled ambulance. People actually try to get away with not doing that. Okay, it also covers the need for an on-file jurisprudence exam from every single staff member. So this course and the exam to follow is what that's referring to. So from now on, that's in this. As EMS in Texas, you're going to have to take this. It's going to be something that's going to be continually changing because the rules are going to change. So you're going to have to stay up to date on what applies to you because, again, I don't know or we didn't know or I wasn't sure is not going to cut it. Okay, ignorance is not an excuse in the eyes of the state. When we're looking at levels of ambulance response, so on the side of all the ambulances, you see where it says, BLS, ALS, MICU, whatever it says on the side. This is what that means. Okay, for a BLS ambulance, when it says just BLS on the side, you have to have at least 2 ECAs, emergency care attendants, or an EMT and an ECA, or 2 EMTs. So it's at the basic life support level. Okay, if it is a BLS ambulance with ALS capability, when you see that on the side, that is, in the situation of it's working as a BLS ambulance, that is just like above, that's staffed the same. If it's operating as an ALS ambulance, that means that there's one AEMT, advanced EMT, or intermediate, however you want to call it. It's all switching to advanced EMT, and an EMT or higher. So I used to run an ALS ambulance for a little bit. Whenever I was going through paramedic school and I had my intermediate, it would be myself and a basic. And we weren't at the BLS level because I was an intermediate at the time, so we were running ALS. But it couldn't have been myself as an intermediate and an ECA, because that does not function as an ALS unit. That won't qualify under these rules. So we would have been breaking the rules had we ever done that. I had to have at least an EMT. When it's BLS with MICU capabilities, if it's BLS, again, same as it was above, but if it's operating as an MICU, so mobile intensive care unit, it's staffed with 1 paramedic and an EMT or higher. So 2 medics, an EMT, and a paramedic, or a paramedic and an advanced. When it's operating straight ALS, that means it's 1 EMT or higher and 1 advanced. ALS with MICU capabilities, same as ALS. MICU is 1 medic or an EMT or 2 medics. And an MICU is at least 1 medic and an EMT or higher. So 2 paramedics, a paramedic and an advanced, or a paramedic and an EMT is an MICU. But if I'm operating as an MICU and I have 2 advanced, that does not function as that. That is not applicable to these rules. Okay? So that's what it means on the side of the trucks when you see that. That's what it means when you're calling on or they're logging into the system as this type of unit. And in your documentation, when you put we had X response, if it was an MICU unit, an MICU response, ALS response, whatever you're calling it, that's what that is referring to. So another thing that this section talks about is treatment protocols. So as EMS providers, that's what we're working under. We have protocols depending on the service that you're at, what you're doing. You're going to have different protocols all over, because in Texas we don't have a statewide medical director. We don't have set state protocols with in Lubbock I can do this, in Abilene I can do this, and Houston I can do this. It's all different depending on who you're working for and their medical director. So your treatment protocols, they have to be accessible. They are required to be signed by the medical director with an effective date. So you can't just say, John signed this and it's good from now until whenever. If they don't know when that is, it's not applicable and won't count. It has to be made for adults, pediatrics, and neonates, and under every level of certification on that ambulance. So let's say that we're working for a service that, doesn't use paramedics. Let's just say we're just straight BLS and, we have BLS with MICU capable ambulance. So like we talked about, that means I can run BLS, I can run all the way up to MICU, but let's just say I only have basic working for me. If there's ever a chance that I might have a paramedic jump on that unit, I technically still have to have protocols all the way up through paramedic. So I can't just have, basics on there, and that's the only protocol we have. And then one day, whenever, John comes to work for my service and he's a paramedic and wants to run, once every 3 months, I still have to have treatment protocols for him as well. So it has to be for everybody that's going to possibly be on the ambulance. Last kind of thing that's major this talks about is the ambulance's inventory. This gets pretty specific, even down to like medications like epinephrine for anaphylaxis, all the way through all trauma care, what type of serial numbers are here. It talks about durable equipment. So if I have, let's say, a Zoll monitor on one unit and a Philips monitor on another, I technically cannot just swap them. So say like the Zoll, for instance, has issues with its 12-lead capabilities. And let's say I have a Philips LifePak 12 that does not at that time have issues. I can't take that LifePak 12 in place of the Zoll unless I notify the state and get all this approved. I can't just do it. So that's very specific in these rules. When it's an ALS or an MICU ambulance, they have to have everything up to that level. Okay, I can't just say, hey, I've got a paramedic on here and, we've got basically bandaging equipment. I don't have a monitor. We're not in MICU all of a sudden just because we have a medic. We have to have that equipment. Waveform capnography is going to be a requirement for all ALS and MICU capable services by January 1st, 2018. It's golden standard. If you were doing any sort of intubation, it's 12 lead of respiratory. That's what we like to call it. Gives you a ton of information. Really good that they've started trying to do this. Cardiac monitors and defibrillators that can transmit 12 leads are going to be required on MICU ambulances and units by January 1st of 2020. It's just stuff that they're trying to get people used to with this exam, with this course, okay? In this situation of I am looking at an EMS provider. Remember, it's not talking you, it's talking the service. So they have a lot of responsibilities that are not necessarily going to fall on you, but at the same time, if you know that, hey, we're supposed to have, X equipment on this ambulance and we don't, and you operate it and you know that you're supposed to have that, and, for example, tourniquets. Let's say that we needed a cat tourniquet or we needed a, whatever type of tourniquet we were going to use. I knew we were supposed to have that, but we didn't. It's not just going to fall back on ABC service. It's going to fall back on you as well, because they're going to say, why didn't you make sure that was on there? You knew that was there, so now you weren't response ready. So kind of falling back to the other rules. They all kind of build on each other in a lot of different ways. When you're looking at 157.11, remember, this is talking everything for the provider as far as the service goes. So if there's any sort of issues, complaints are in here. It talks about how to file complaints, how they're handled. If you are upset with the service, again, you can't go spewing misinformation like we spoke about earlier. You have to go to the state and say, this has occurred. This is what I want to do about it. You can call your local rep. You can call down to main offices. You can get online. There's ways to file complaints. There's a lot of ways about this. You can't just go and say, they're doing these things. This section also covers emergency suspensions. So emergency suspensions would be one of the most immediate and serious actions that DSHS can give to you. It would be basically where they're saying you're on hold. We are trying to figure out what's going on, but at the moment you're on hold. You can't touch patients. You can't work. Okay, it's not indefinite forever. Now I'm not going to be able to work anymore, and they're laying down all these laws on me. It's just we don't want you working until we can figure it out. So immediately you're going to be suspended. You can't work anymore in the capacity you normally do. When you're looking at 157.16, so that is EMS provider disciplinary actions. When you look at this, if it's talking about emergency suspensions, probation, revocation, denial of a license, or administrative penalties, this is still talking your service. Just because it's the same provider, remember, that's not saying you necessarily, it's saying the people that you're working for. So if it's a non-emergency suspension, that would be like falsifying documents, forms of forgery, not maintaining patient confidentiality, operating inappropriately, anything like that. They can, at that point, give them a non-emergency suspension or emergency suspension, just depending on what has occurred. Accountability, all the documentation that you create for your patients, as well as your partners, everybody else who works there, the service has to keep up with that. You don't have to necessarily keep that documentation. They're not really relying on you to be the one that's maintaining this stuff for X amount of years. They have to do that. So this covers all the accountability issues as far as what they have to keep, when they have to keep it, how long they have to keep it. Administrative record has to be aware of this type of stuff. So when anybody violates anything, when a complaint comes in, say like, they have a HIPAA complaint, and they say you've done something way out there, you've broken these